What's up? My name is Darryl Williams and welcome back to another episode of Real Estate 101. All right guys, today we're going to be talking about something called a purchase CEMA. This video is going to be a little bit longer than our normal videos because it's a lot to tackle, and this is something that I've done recently, and always I like to talk about what I've done and bring my experience to each of these videos. So let's dive in, but before we do, please take a moment to like this video, smash that like button, please share it, it would mean a lot to me. All right, so what is a purchase CEMA? Now, this is something I recently experienced this year in a real estate transaction. I didn't know what it was the first time it came my way, and I had to learn along the way of doing this deal. And I definitely didn't let my client know. I did not know what they were talking about when they suggested a purchase CEMA. So if you're a savvy buyer and you already know what this is just a review viewer for a real estate agent, and a client recently brought this up, you're like, I have no idea what that is. This video is also for you. And if it hasn't come up at all, this video is still for you, because now if it does come up, you have an idea what this purchase CEMA is, and it's definitely New York specific from my understanding. If it's somewhere else in the country, leave a comment below and let me know. First off, CEMA stands for Consolidation Extension Modification Agreement. It is a strategy for reducing your closing costs when you're buying or selling a condo or a house in New York City. The purchase CEMA itself is the act of assigning a seller's existing mortgage to the buyer. The CEMA reduces the amount of new loan money which must be originated, and this reduces two closing costs: the buyer's mortgage recording tax bill and the seller's New York State transfer tax bill. What are the buyer benefits? Now, the greatest savings will occur to the buyer in a purchase CEMA loan in NYC. This is because the buyer will only have to pay the dreaded mortgage recording tax on the new money borrowed in a purchase, because the seller's existing mortgage is assigned to the buyer's lender at closing and amended to reflect the new terms of the buyer's mortgage commitment. This is significant because the mortgage recording tax is one of the most significant closing costs in NYC, aside from the equally fair New York City mansion tax. Buyers are charged 2.05% of the borrowed amount for new mortgages below $500,000. The rate increases to 2.175% of the borrowed amount for new mortgages over $500,000 for 1 to 3 family residential units and individual residential condo units. Larger multifamily and commercial properties with new mortgages over $500,000 have to pay 2.8% on the borrowed amount, because the mortgage recording tax in New York City is only levied on new borrowings. The buyer will only have to pay the mortgage recording tax on the difference between the new mortgage and the seller's existing mortgage principal. I know that was a mouthful, so let's break it down with an example. Say that a buyer is purchasing a $1 million condo unit and using a purchase CEMA mortgage. In this example, the seller has a residual mortgage balance of $400,000. The buyer wants to finance 80% loan to value and will therefore need a total of $800,000. However, because the seller is able to transfer his existing $400,000 loan balance to the buyer as a result only needs to take out a new mortgage of $400,000. The two loans are consolidated under the new borrower, but the buyer is able to pay the mortgage recording tax only on $400,000 versus $800,000. The savings are quite significant in the example for the buyer. The mortgage recording tax on $800,000 would be $17,400, while the mortgage recording tax on $400,000 will only be $8,200. Keep in mind that because the new loan has under $500,000, it was taxed at a lower rate. That's $9,200 in savings, or approximately 53% in mortgage recording tax avoided. And you always want to avoid paying taxes. No, pay your taxes. All right, so we just discussed what the benefits would be to the buyer in a purchase CEMA agreement. So what are the benefits towards the sellers? A seller can benefit from a purchase CEMA loan as well by saving on New York State transfer taxes, which are normally 0.4% of the sale price. Because the seller is assigning his mortgage principal to the new buyer, the seller will only be taxed on the home equity being transferred. As great as this benefit is though, keep in mind that the more costly New York City transfer tax is not affected by the use of the purchase CEMA loan. The New York City real property transfer tax is one of the biggest closing costs in New York City for sellers and can range from 1% to 1.425% of the sales price for residential transactions. For example, if the seller is in contract to sell his home for $1 million and he has a residual mortgage principal balance of $400,000, he will owe New York State transfer tax on his $600,000 of home equity instead of the entire $1 million. In this example, the seller will only owe $2,400 of New York State transfer taxes instead of $4,000 or 40% in savings, which is a big deal. You saw buyer benefits, seller benefits. Now, how does one get a purchase CEMA agreement in a residential transaction sale? Buyers should work with an experienced buyer's broker, like myself, who's actually done a purchase CEMA transaction twice, who will be able to convince the seller to agree to a purchase CEMA. After all, a purchase CEMA loan can only happen with the seller's approval, and the seller's bank has to approve it as well. Furthermore, it's critical to get the seller on board as early as possible in a transaction to reduce any time drag on your closing date. Sellers sometimes will resist agreeing to a purchase CEMA mortgage because they feel that they are still on the hook for the original mortgage. However, an experienced buyer's agent, again, such as myself, or anyone that I know that's a buyer's agent, will be able to explain to the listing agent that this is simply not the case. So there you have it. That's a purchase CEMA. So now, as you as a real estate agent, this can be a trump card for you if your buyer's concerned about the cost of the property and wants more savings. You can negotiate on the sales price only, but so much. This is a nice trump card to pull out and like, hey, I can save you on the back end, all these costs, line it up and get them on board. And now you just have to go to the listing agent, convince their seller to get on board as well. This is like a high level tactic, so it's not something you're just gonna throw out on every deal. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned a lot, and I'll see you in the next one.